But who I am, I mean, there was an introduction. I mean, you can find me on the internet. I'm a principal scientist at DTI. My research is in personality and psychometrics and machine learning, AI. These days, a lot of AI. I have a PhD from Bowling Green State University in the US. For those who doesn't know, it's probably the best IO program, industrial organizational psychology program in the US. I have a master's from Baruch College in New York, and I was not originally a psychologist. I was a philosopher. My undergraduate is from Sofia University in Bulgaria. I was a Fulbright scholar, um, and I've studied around the world. I've traveled in many, many countries. My hobby is climbing mountains and gardening and cooking. Um, funny fact, I just signed 3 weeks ago another book, but this time it's gonna be a handbook, and I'm gonna be an editor, so I will be pushing people to write. So yeah, I cannot wait to to do that. Although this time I have to supervise them, so I have to read. But it's better, it's easier to read and comment than writing. So I'm happy with where I am. Yeah.
Okay,
I,
thank
I
you.
live I live in Pittsburgh in the USA, in the state of Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Thank you, Nikita.
Well, my name is Nikita, and how can I say it? And I'm pretty obsessed with personality. I worked in the field for 12 years. You might ask, how obsessed? Well, I profiled my wife to be with 2 assessments before I proposed. You can't rely on one assessment for high consequence decisions. And it's true what they say about marriage. It is psychological. One is a psycho, the other one's logical. And I'm the psycho of that relationship. So aren't you lucky for 1 hour and 36 minutes coming up?
Okay, thank you very much. Real quickly, those who visit us office understand some of the mental constructs we use about who leaders are and what leaders do. But those who are new, and you two guys, don't know this. So what I want to try to do is locate the conversation today in this larger conversation of leadership. We draw a picture of who leaders are and what leaders do as a matrix across 2 dimensions. So we think of the who the person is, the leader, as 2 sets of objectives, and it's affective and cognitive in traditional developmental concepts. And then the leading, the action, we think of in two dimensions of the conditions they set, or their indirect influence, and the results they get, or their more direct effect type of actions. But we also cross dimension that or with uh, different motivations, one of them being sense making or understanding, the other being connections or relationship building, and the third one being achievement or the results, what we typically conventionally think of as leaders wanting to be high achievers. And so looking at those things from those 2 sets, you end up with 12 lenses. But only this half, the be, and we call it be know, set, and do, as the little labels we give them. The leader is really it's who they are as a person, but it's also how they've individuated or integrated their knowledge and experiences, are both things that don't exist outside the person, they exist in people. And for personality, we think of personality as just that first column. So it's this, the leader is these aspects or lenses, and we think of them in 3 ways. And we're not fixed on thinking of them in 3 ways. In fact, we always want to discover different things. And so the question is, how do you guys thinking of personality? And I'll just say that in your book, you look at it from many different perspectives or lenses, but you do tend to gel around the 5-factor model of leadership. And that's great. We like the 5-factor model. But what it doesn't cover, the other spaces, those other spaces for us are, cognitive capability or cognitive development. And the bottoms, this other space here is more reflective of adult development, like a Torbert or a Keegan development stage experience, where it's not just the constructs of who they are, it's the constructs of what motivates them or what they care about. So it's post-conventional aspects of personality might be how some people say it. Are these three aspects of personality make sense to you guys? And do you have ways of uh, measuring or characterizing the person outside of the five-factor model that maybe fits some of these other spaces?
Well, I'll start off and then I'm sure Georgi will add the wisdom that comes with it. So first of all, public service announcement. How can you tell this article about psychology is highly likely, statistically likely to be bullshit? It starts with the following words. Psychologists agree. Psychologists don't agree on anything. And personality is not an exception. We can't even agree what it is. In our book, we provide 5 or 6 different definitions of how people define personality. And I think that when people say personality is static or is it fluid? Well, if it was static, we should probably be able to define it by now. And we can't. So personality is a fascinating topic because you have thousands of peer-reviewed studies researching personality with multiple models, including Big Five, Hexaco, you name it. But none of them can agree what personality actually is. And that's what makes this field of personality psychology fascinating, because we apply the scientific rigor to researching something we can't really define. And then the second layer is that Big Five is just that. It's a model. To me, the first personality model, as we discuss in our book, is a zodiac. You asked one question and it gives you 12 types. Whatever you are, like Leo, which is clearly the best because that's what I am. And but the key thing is that what people are fascinated by, though it has no validity, no reliability, but it's still in every freaking newspaper. I open up online news, and every couple of weeks I see most read news number 3. What are Virgos have in store this week? So people are fascinated by it. And then what comes next? How do they match up to other types? Oh, I'm a Virgo. Can I date a Capricorn? What to watch out for? What does this imply to us? That we have a self narrative, who we think we are, and we find models quite useful. First port of call is how we narrate ourselves. So, what you have in your horoscope. Second step, how you relate to other people. And over the thousands of years, psychometrics evolved and personality models, like we have type models have 16 types, only 4 types more than the zodiac. It took us like 1,000 years to come up with those. And Big Five came up through the psycholexical approach, analysis of language. We started by Allport and Odbert in 1930s. They picked up the English dictionary and they identified 17,908 words that they felt had to do with character, personality, etc. And then they analyzed that for 40 years and they passed the baton and the future generation analyzed it. And through this, it seems there's 5 factors, which are neuroticism, propensity to negative emotions, extroversion, positive emotions and need for stimuli, openness, creativity, thinking outside the box, agreeableness, how nice you play with others and who do you play nice with, and conscientiousness, strengths of drive and purpose. Just simplifying it. But the key thing is it's a model. And the benefit of personality psychology is that it evolves with time. So, and what's really important here is that maybe in 10 years it'd be the big 6. Maybe in 20 years it'd be the big 3. We just don't know yet because that would be in the future. So whenever we look at a big 5 or any other personality model, we should treat it as a model and how useful it is in application, be it leadership development, be it personal growth, or how we relate to others. But we should never confuse a model for personality. It's a model of personality. And none of them claim to measure everything. And those who do, step away while maintaining eye contact. Georgi.
Okay, Nikita. So uh, I think the question was, how does our def like first it's personality of leaders or in general personality, Tom? Is it you're interested how what we think outside of the big five in terms of developments and clinic?
Yeah, well, when we say leaders, we mean anyone who's in a position to make a contribution or open up some creative action. We don't think of it as a position of authority, like most corporate view of leader is. We think those people are leaders as well, but we don't limit leadership to them. So it's anyone who's working in some kind of with someone else to create a community or some result. And yeah, I was curious about whether you see the 5-factor model as just a slice of the personality and how you see it in relationship to other measures of personality like adult stage development or something like that.
Okay, that makes the answer easier. Personality is everything. It's not big five, your construct, my constructs, the painting on the wall. Personality is everything. Like personality can explain most of the big things happening in history. If you can even see like the egos of two men, women, regardless, two human beings, frequently have decided the fate of nations, the egos. Stalin and Churchill tricking Roosevelt to go to sleep and writing down on a piece of handkerchief how they'll divide Europe. Isn't that personality there? So we have the Americans sleeping there in the other room, and we, the Russians and the English, are gonna figure out how to split the Eastern Europeans. Poor Eastern Europeans. Me and Nikita know the results of this. But let's go back to personality. And your question, Big Five is part of personality. It's just the most replicated model so far, and we use it. But Bob Hogan is right when he says, why don't we have ambition there? Why don't we have 7 slices instead of 5 slices? Or the hexaco has 6 slices, but it's always the same pie, the same pizza, regardless how you slice it. But maybe it's more useful to have an ambition as a factor, separated from extroversion and conscientiousness. It's better for predicting leadership competencies. That I can assure you. We have seen it at DTI, we have seen it at Hogan. I've worked at Hogan before, and ambition is a big factor, a big predictor of leadership skills, and success and emergence. So pretty much all leadership. Now about so in the book, I think we put Big Five as the core, and it makes sense because in neuroticism starts to develop 2 weeks after you're born. You can already tell which child is gonna be neurotic. It starts to scream fast. I mean, people with children, don't judge me. Maybe I'm saying foolish things, but that's what I saw with my brother when he was born. So extroversion is also very genetic. Um,
It might
and
be natural. It might be natural anxiety, or it might be gas. But
Well, or he might have seen Georgi as his older brother, and he realized he needs to live with him for every day of his life.
That is true. But my brother loves me these days. I have problems with him. I did my job well, apparently. Um, yeah, so I had that question many years ago by a reviewer on an article. Are the big five more biological, or how they relate with values? Because the article was on values. So this is the answer I gave then, is very good for answering your question, Tom. So values are part of your personality, because in the book, in the second chapter, we have motivations, values, attitudes, all cognitive ability, all the pieces, we call them, of the puzzle, but they are attached either later or they're in the outer sphere of the core. And the core are, as Eysenck found out for the first thing, neuroticism, openness, extroversion. So yeah, so that does not exclude constructs from clinical psychology, from developmental psychology. I wish we had the space to go in there, but we didn't. I think everything can be explained together with personality.
yeah, that sounds great. I do have a kind of a follow-up question actually with Dr. Robin here in mind. I recently had a series of conversations with a really top performer in the artistic world. And it struck me how contrasting their personality was from what we like to idealize, what us organizational development, leadership type people like to develop, idealize a more softer, balanced personality. And this person had a high degree of anxiety and neuroticism and a really high level of conscientiousness. This is how they appeared. And the question occurred to me is, why disrupt that? Because those things become essential to his being able to perform at a high level. Think top athlete, think top salesperson or something like that, where an extreme personality profile actually is helpful to what they want to, who they want to be, but may not be healthy for them in the long run or from another perspective. How do you reconcile those two things? Do you see those two contrasts?
Is that when you read articles about well-being, how can you tell the article is written by a psychologist and non-psychologist? An article written by a psychologist, it would start with subjective well-being. Everybody has their own understanding of what well-being is. What's well-being for me is not what's well-being for others. The thing is that if you have high neuroticism, what is like most humans are so neurotic about neuroticism. That was the generalization. I'll say some humans. Because if we give an assessment, a questionnaire, has been a study done, which we mentioned in the book, that when you ask Americans how do they want to change their personality, 80% will say, I want to change my personality. And most people want to be lower on neuroticism and higher extroverted. Like the world needs more extroverts. Come on, please. And the thing is that with neuroticism, what it is, it's propensity for negative emotional affect. People who are neurotic experience negative emotions more often. Anxiety, as you mentioned, anger, hostility, it might be depression, self-doubt, self-consciousness, all of that, more likely to experience. Lower neurotics, it doesn't mean they don't experience those things. It just might take more stuff that happens in their lives for them to experience it. But there's a benefit to high neuroticism. Of course, your well-being goes down, ta 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 ta. But the benefit is, you know your neurosis. You know them by name. So when negative stuff happens in your life, you go, "Hello, darkness, my old friend," because you know them. And you have your coping mechanisms, some more healthy than others. But a low neurotic, when stuff happens in their life, they don't recognize their neurosis by name. They don't know what's happening, and they don't have coping mechanisms. And just to add to it, their friends probably think they're going to be fine because there's a resilient one. So when life hits them with something, they might really struggle. So check on your low neurotics and high neurotics. And another key thing, when we talk about high performance, we need to talk about the price of it. And the biggest question, is it sustainable? So if this creatives goes in 6 months of fantastic creativity and then 6 months of depression and anxiety, the question is, how sustainable is it? And the question then becomes, what sort of coping mechanisms are in place? Also, if they're highly creative, they probably score high on openness. So if they're high openness, high conscientiousness, there might be a bit of an issue there as well. Because if you're high openness, then you imagine how it should be. You might fall in love with an idea, and which is great. But if you're also high conscientiousness, you're more likely to have an internalized locus of control. So if something goes right, fantastic, you're in control. But if something goes wrong, you assume all of the guilt. And if you're high conscientiousness and you're like, my God, this happened, your low conscientiousness, more like a daisical colleagues, will say, don't worry, John, stuff happens. And you go, maybe on your watch, sunshine, but not on mine. And the danger here becomes of high openness, high conscientiousness, that you imagine something, you create it, but life happens in the meantime. And the creation is not just how you imagined it. And then you take all the guilt for it because of high conscientiousness that you couldn't bring it to life as you imagined it. So the question is, can this person with high neuroticism and self-criticism potentially, then to what person takes pride or even satisfaction in their creations? Or is it always perpetually, it will be better next time, without actually reflecting, working with their team, how we can make together better next time? Or is it a perpetual kind of novelty bias seeking and dissatisfaction going forwards?
Yeah. I mean, this person comes across as, and I obviously don't know them and has been along, but the question it raises is they almost suffer this perfectionism and this anxiety. It's the price they pay to motivate, to move them to their performance. But how sustainable is it? How much self-care is there for them there? I don't know.
Exactly. Is it high performance or is it sustainable high performance, which can be completely different things?
I recently got a feedback on our chapter on personality and leadership, and they said you took a behavioral approach instead of a personality approach, and I kind of doubled down on that. And I'm gonna say why. Because you can talk a lot about how we radically, I mean, even I love it, that radical acceptance between people. We love you with your derailers. We will empathize with you, blah, 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 blah. But when you lead thousands of people in battle, when their salaries depend on you, then you really have to have mastered your derailers. And last time I wrote about personality development, I wrote in my book that it's difficult. So most likely you won't be able to change your personality, unfortunately. Developing yourself, the self-developing itself will develop itself, but you are more gonna be like the dog that is uh, running after the cart, in the famous Roman proverb. Just don't resist the fate, just run after it so it's less pain. That's how most people live their lives. Instead of developing their personality and taking serious choices and facing the consequences and enjoying their development, they prefer the easy way, religion, cults, going after, you know, political ideologies, being safe in suburbia in America. So they don't want to face difficult decisions. But when the leaders have to face them, and then their personality with its derailers shows its ugly head. They cannot afford to make these mistakes, so they have to behaviorally control themselves. And behavior can be learned. Behavior can be changed because we are animals, and animals respond to pain and to gratification.
Yeah.
So to distinguish a bad behavior, a bad like a derailer, you have to punish or reward in proper doses. And I'm sorry, I sound like Skinner, but I even think about my own development. There were times then I had to pinch myself. I had to print things to what to be in front of me to not do some things. And once your brain forms these connections. And next time you are like urging to say something inappropriate because you are highly excitable and you want to derail an important meeting about strategizing as an executive. I mean, I'm preparing to be an executive apparently. Um, you just say, wait, last time I did this, it did not work well. I have gone through development. I had to, I was punished, then I was rewarded not to do it. So let's not do it. And you behaviorally control yourself. And your personality, as Bob Hogan says, it's your own problem. It's like your identity. Uh, and then maybe as a leader, you have to realize if you are up for this serious job, you have to control your personality.
Yeah. So let me see if I can capture a few of those points. One of them is that it it may not be as much about changing our personality as being aware of it and being accepting it for what it is, and then being creative within that constraint.
Yeah.
And then as we're interacting, whether it's in small context or big high pressure leadership concept, we want to be responsible for the effect that we're creating. And so that includes the behavior, and we may have to take on a well-rehearsed set of skills in order to be responsible for that
Yeah.
effect.
Yes, and if that creates pressure, I'm sure it creates pressure with who you truly think you are. Then you can check out from your work and go have your hobby. Then go get boxing. You can take archery. You can garden. It's like you would be surprised how good people are when, for example, they do house chores, or I build retaining walls in my free time. I work with stone. I use sledgehammer. If you do not like somewhere at work, you go out, destroy some stones, dig a big trench. Believe me, after that, you are a very mild version of yourself. You can take a meeting with them and be very happy. Guess why? Because you'll be tired. You'll be so
And
sometimes you need to
you've
work
worked
on
out
them.
your achievement.
Yeah, and isn't that for what Freud said? You have to sublimate in higher goals, like whether they are retaining walls or art, you have to use that energy to just use it in a better direction. Don't create problems for yourself as a leader.
Interesting. Switch over to Mr. Paul Crick here, who's gonna take the pace here on the next segment. What's on your mind here, Paul?
Couple of things. One is to do with talent acquisition and development. But I'm more interested to begin with to consider we glorify the individual, and the personality seems to focus on self as a primary construct, whatever that is. Whatever talk, as we've said, talk to Buddhists, talk to whoever. You're never going to land the self in a half-hour conversation. But my concern is that we develop because of others. We develop certainly as in our formative years because of what we learn. And you could take a behaviorist perspective and say, well, based on the carer's facial expressions, the level of engagement, that causes the nervous system to behave in certain ways. And therefore, I learn to self-regulate my emotions because I've been taught well by a carer that is also able to self-regulate their emotions and pass that on. But if I have dysregulated attachment because I didn't get that care, then the environment I'm in. So I'm curious to hear the perspective that says, look, that there is no such thing as a single brain. We work together and we are a product of each other, and we continue to be a product of each other as we develop. And because we're obsessed with, certainly in the West, of if it's an issue, then it's your issue and it's your personality, and you need to sort yourself out. When in reality, if you look at other cultures, you look at it as a much more collective approach, and that collective approach shapes how that person learns to navigate, celebrate differences, and also navigate those differences through passages of uncertainty.
Well, we have a whole chapter on this. It's called Working with the Opposite. And diversity of personality, because a lot of personality pop psychology, which you see in like popular press, how to be more extroverted, how to be more introverted. It's again this hyper focus on the individual. So you need to do everything, and it's usually 18-month cycle. Whatever's in vogue. So like how to be more vulnerable. But surely, if you need to be more vulnerable, implies there's a threat you're vulnerable to, and shouldn't we address the threat first? And there is this whole kind of bring your full self to work and all of this slogans and jargon, which when you boil it down means not that much sometimes. And in order to be all of those things, you can be, but it's exhausting. So if you're like super introverted, and I always say an introvert is just an extrovert with good taste, they're just more selective.
I feel better now, thank you.
And you need to be super extroverted every day. How does that make you feel, Paul? Like if you're in back-to-back meetings, you're interacting with loads of people
I'm
and all
exhausted.
talking crap all the time. So it's not interesting. You're exhausted. If you do this for too long, what do people say? A part of me might die inside. And that's how bad it gets. Some people describe this as physiologically painful. There's some truth to that. There's been some research done that if you're like really high on one side, and so if you're ambiverted, so mix of extroversion and introversion, and you act a bit more extroverted, you actually get more positive emotional affect, less negative emotional affect, happy times. If you're super introverted, trying to be more extroverted, you actually get more negative affect, less positive affect. So it's a trade-off. So you need to kind of play to your strengths. But here we come to the social element. We are social creatures, unless some exceptions. And we need that contact. So why isn't our personality social as well? What do people say when they meet each other? We just clicked, or we had good chemistry. Well, what did click exactly? What were the reactive substances in order for that chemistry to occur? And what we propose, part of this is personality, is that we need each other. Think of people you've been in relationship thing with, who you were best colleagues. Sometimes it's completely opposite to us, but we work together and rely on each other. And what we propose in our book is what we call personality symbiosis. Imagine if you've been working together with a colleague for 5 to 10 years or married to your opposite. You almost outsource it. So if you're highly introverted, you might have an extroverted spouse who's a PR department of the family. Or if you're highly creative, such as Tom's the person you worked with, who actually translates your ideas to the most of the population so they can actually understand them, because people don't understand the greatest ideas. They go with the ideas they can understand. So it's how we work together and how we rely on each other, how we play to each other's strength. That's what's actually is really interesting. But for this, we need to surpass this idea that all is an individual.
Well, I made sure to include a passage where I said this self-obsession about I change the world. It all depends on me. I can make miracles. This is so Western. It's sickening. The world is not led by the West. Look at this kind of decaying nation of the USA. The USA has become problematic country around the world, and the world is starting to move beyond the preaching of from the USA, because the Western view of the world is in a big crisis, maybe for a reason, and there will be some deliverance. And in the East, we have a collectivist view of the self. People understand they are born in a family, in a culture with norms they have to follow, and it works. So that does not mean they don't have selves. It's just their selves are more understood from like they are part of a pattern of a living like community. Whereas here, I have a big house and a lot of safeguards for my property, and I work on the stock exchange, with my investments, and I don't want to know who are my neighbors, but everything depends on me, and it's my goals or the highway. That is a little bit sick, in my opinion. In the West view, it's not a productive view for the future of this world, where we have to live together with various ethnicities, various problems around the world. We are now all connected, and you are saying that the Western world that puts the emphasis on the individual freedom is relevant. I think it's a dying out concept, and the sooner the West realizes it, the better, because the last time I checked, Europe doesn't have coal, doesn't have that much water, doesn't have the resources. So we have to import, and we are dependent on these people. So um, we this the we are born into, as the philosophers say, a horizon, a historical horizon, and we have to live within it. Our historical horizon is what's happening in the economy, geography, in relations between countries. And we think it's all about my personality. No, your personality is driven by these events. So yeah, I agree. It's not. The self is developing itself, but within the horizon it is born in. That is something I understand. I'm saying many psychologists cannot understand, because they don't read philosophy, they don't read history, they don't even read economy, they don't even know the price of gold on the stock market. It's like, and I'm starting to hate this view of psychologists. They are so myopic in their little social science.
Some psychologists, Georgi,
It's all about yeah, you're right. It's
we
across
were just in a conference
academia.
for IO psychologists. There was 900 events over 3 days. You know
Yeah.
how many were on ethics and sustainability? Three.
Yeah.
So
Everyone is about prediction of job performance, but we are moving away. I mean, I want to have high contributing individuals. I want them to be happy with themselves. Why are we still so obsessed about the criterion of job performance? Why are we do not introduce the criterion of well-being? If I have someone who is really an expert in their field and they have good well-being, I can guarantee you they have very high job performance. We are still thinking like slave drivers from the 19th century, how to squeeze a little bit more from the people. And the people had enough with it.
And I think that takes me to the second area where personality troubles me, and it's not a methodological concern because, as you say, you know, all models are flawed, but some are useful. Um, it's more the idea that as we move to a world that is driven by machines and automation, we have job listings that are created by machines with certain criteria and requirements and elements of that that are broken down into these are the skills we're looking for, that then gets passed through a machinistic or machine-driven or algorithm-driven approach that says, well, we're going to select on these criteria and these personalities, so Big Five, for example. And it just makes me think, well, hang on, we've got machines creating jobs and we've got machines using algorithms. What the hell is what fresh hell is this going to produce? We're using personality to make selections that just don't seem to make sense. I'm not framing the question very well.
No, you did well. I think
Yeah.
we have to build communities and fight for our rights, and we have to use our personalities uh, to build communities again to fight for our rights. Because Karl Marx said, no, it was I think Hegel. No, I think Karl Marx said, whoever owns the means of work, he owns us, like means of production. And you are saying you are hitting right on this point. Who owns the AI that's going to be doing all of this work for us? Like, okay, it sounds like AI is going to apply for its own job. AI is going to relieve us from so many mundane tasks. It's going to make us efficient. But is this AI going to be open? Or I have to pay a subscription for it to some who overload, who owns AI, like OpenAI, think they want to help humanity, but they don't want to open their models. That is extremely helpful view for, yes, to make themselves rich.
So given the uncertainties of what personalities or the different perspectives of that, do you have a view as to, you know, thinking going back to the Prometheus framework, and we're trying to build this common understanding of what we mean when we talk about leading and making leading more common?
Yeah.
What place does personality play in that? Do you see now that you've completed your book?
Okay,
Sorry.
if we start quoting like Marx,
About-
etc. I have to quote Jiddu Krishnamurti. It's no indication of health to be well adapted to profoundly sick society. And the selection methodologies are part of our society. Because let's not forget, it's not only employers who'll be using machines to select, it's going to be applicants who are going to be putting their CVs through machines like ChatGPT to improve their chances. They're going to be asking how to answer those psychometric questions. So it's machine writing items and machines making the applications. So
Yes.
so it's going to be quite an interesting little feedback loop. The question is like, where's the humanity is getting lost? And the question is, humans also created it. So it's a complex philosophical debate. But when it comes to personality, little knowledge is a very dangerous thing. Because in South Africa, to be a psychometrician, to use psychometrics, you need 6 years of education and 6 months internship scheme. In order to be a psychometrician in UK, you can attend a 2-day course online and be a psychometrician. So 2 days versus 6 years and 6 months. Sorry, but I'm not sure Elon Musk's link is ever going to be there. The key thing is that it's not a qualification, it's indoctrination in a particular line of thought. So you can qualify at Hogan, Luminous Spark, Neo, but the thing is that all of these models are created by humans. And most psychometric reports tell you more about personality of the author than it does about your client, because it's somebody's opinion on what personality is. And sometimes it's quite dated. Like some psychometrics are born in 1944 and still used today, 1949, 1970s. And of course, some keep updated more than others. I'm not just saying it's an old psychometric, toss it in the trash. It all has its uses. But we need to be aware that the tool created on models of 1944 missed on 80 years of research of personality. So to what extent it kept up with its time? Now, when you use psychometrics like this, personally, you know their faults. You can look at the items. You can see how they score. You know what measurement error they are. You can get into nitty-gritty. But imagine putting them into a black box and saying it's machine learning. And people selling it and people using it have no idea what's in the black box. It sort of already happens with publishers because let's say somebody, example, SHL, they create Peter Saville, fantastic, with Holdsworth create the psychometric in 1980s. Peter Saville hasn't been part of SHL for quite a long time now. They still sell a lot of OPQ. So the question is, how did the knowledge transfer from the original author to everybody else all these years later, and how it kept being updated? Now, don't get me wrong, OPQ is a good tool in many ways. But the key thing is that often in psychometric publishing, the original author of the psychometric is almost attributed with divine qualities.
Mm.
Like they have seen the truth in the human condition. And I can tell you, I have met most of the authors of the more popular psychometrics. I haven't met Myers-Briggs's because, you know, that was before my time. And I can tell you one thing. None of these authors, none of them, had divine intervention into the human condition. So they're all biased, they're all subjective, but you can now use it because if you're a practitioner and been using tool for a while, you know its biases, some of them. But if you put it into a black box, there'll be no way to know.
Mm.
What's even worse, often these tools are branded with the biggest bias, saying this is bias free. I don't think anything can be bias free. And thinking something bias free when you roll it out to 10,000 people a year or hundreds of thousands of applicants is one of the most dangerous biases you can have. And
Yeah.
so
whether the human condition, then what happens to the human condition, and therefore if leading is about accompanying self and accompanying others and going with them to a particular destination, where does the human piece go? And therefore, what role does personality play in that? And I guess it becomes a bit of a philosophical debate, but I'm more interested in how we ground that in practice. You know, so if we fight back, to your point, Georgi, then what do we do? You know, Prometheus is part of that movement of how do we move the needle on the conversation, in a vital conversation that is happening, but needs to have a change of course. Most people would agree.
I mean, the book says it. You have to develop yourself, be the best version of yourself, be happy with you. Once you realize you are balanced, once you balance your traits, once you know who you are, you have self-insight, self-esteem, self-awareness, all things self, you are gonna be a formidable foe for the, entrenched elites and this financial elites that are like snakes in suits. Well, there is nothing worse for them to fight than a person who is honest with themselves, knows their limits, balanced, doesn't need to be bright, cares for the person next to them, like builds a community. If we have a critical mass of such people, we're gonna be a formidable foe. So as psychologists, let's concentrate on the person and help where we can. We cannot help with, we are not generals to wage wars. We are not financiers to take over banks. We can just help the self and the person.
Okay. Tom, that's all I had.
Yeah, so it's a good transition point. I want to make a little observation about the kind of the topics that we've naturally evolved in today mirror the way that we think of leading in the Prometheus framework. In this sense, is that part of what we talked about is the conventional getting something achievement, whether it's individual achievement, the Western view, or if it's collective, the Eastern view. Part of what we talked about was the well-being, about creating human experience, not just achieving things. And part of what we talked about is coherence or understanding, or whether it's AI or whether it's us, or how do we take control of the narrative and our insight into how we're thinking. And so, for better or worse, those are the three kind of lanes that we see as a more balanced whole to who leaders are. It's not just about making people feel good. It's not just about making money, and it's not just about research and articulation, but it's really a blend of those three things that create some alchemy. But now we're going to do a breakout session, because I'm thinking that there's lots of folks who have been very stimulated and have more questions or more comments that they'd like to field. And so we're going to give you a chance to formulate those with each other in small groups. I love the quote in the book, and I sent it in the broadcast, from Freud. It's love and work, work and love. It's everything's about work and love. When we think about leadership, people tend to think about the work piece conventionally, getting things achieved, driving things to conclusion. And they don't think about the well-being piece, although it's popular now and maybe an overly sentimental way to talk about how the experience we're creating for folks. I think it's legitimate. I don't know that we're good at talking about it yet, but we can talk about, love as part of leading. Also something I'd like us to be more comfortable with. But and we see this pattern in many assessments and models of leadership. It's, are you work oriented? Are you person oriented? Worker or people oriented? I think it's missing the third leg, which is, do we have a sense of reality? Do we understand what's going on, and are we creating that for one another? So that's my lead in for the other part of my question, which is this idea of using psychometrics for talent acquisition, for hiring. So I feel pretty skeptical that of the science behind it, in terms of the dependent variable of performance that people are using to associate with the independent variables of people's personality. What information are we really using? Are we making shit up so we can sell stuff, versus do we have actually information that's valuable and valid and reliable to base talent acquisition on? And the second half of my question then is, if it's not about changing our personality, but rather being more comfortable with our personality and the personality of others, why not hire anybody who wants to do a job and teach them how to deal with different people?
All right, so that's a three-layered question.
Lots of layers.
Freud, then selection, and then why do we need it at all? I would suggest that, first of all, about selling bullshit, well, how much consulting is based on this? And my best experience and advice I ever had on that topic came from an autistic student I was tutoring. He goes, you like to use long words? And I go, yeah. He goes, would you like me to tell you why? I go on then. To hide the fact you know shit what you're talking about. And to me, that has been very good advice. And I work in psychometrics. That's already a pretty long damn word to start with. But the longer people use long words, the less likely they know what they're talking about. So I think that's the first thing. Second, as far as love, work, life, the best thing I can say is that I was chatting with the ex-CEO of a major corporate. He's about to turn 70. Because we got work-life balance all wrong. I go on then. What about it? And I was expecting something really big and philosophical. Goes, no, it should be life-work balance. Why do we put work first? And sometimes it's the simplest switches. And as far as selection in psychometrics, the thing is, if you have 10,000 applicants per place, you just cannot have an HR department big enough to process them all. The question, and then if you can sift, if you can even say that an assessment gives you 5% more confidence this person might be likely to be a better employee. And here often you will get an ability assessment as well as a personality one. Personality is some type cut-off scores, so you need to score in the same line, but mostly it's ability assessments. So, and ability is like critical reasoning. So as my mentor used to say, ability gives you the can-do, can the candidate do a task? And personality gives you the will-do, will they do a task? But the key thing is that they just rely on getting like 5 or 1% of the top applicants, because that's all the HR department can handle. And the issue is, can we advertise jobs better? Can we sift better, even just self-selecting? But the issue is, you might get 10,000 applicants per job. So you need to sift. So the question, what are they going to use? Even if you don't use personality assessments, your people will assess personality. because that selection panel, the three people assessing that candidate, will be using their understanding of personality. And they might be using star signs. They might be saying, oh, they crossed their arms and were poker face. And I watched a YouTube video on body language that they don't like this job. So, there's much worse stuff out there that can be used as part of selection processes. And validated psychometric might not be that bad, but you might be using complete crap that doesn't tell you anything of value, and that actually you shoot yourself in the foot because it's based on sales performance of last 30 years was associated with personality traits. But does past performance associate with future performance? Or are you picking up traits which were only useful before, and maybe
Do
you're
those,
upset
do those
diversity?
contexts have anything to do with the context we're hiring?
Exactly. And who are you adverse impacting? Neurodiversity, etc. Is it taken into account? There's so many variables here.
Not like attacking psychometrics. This was built over 50 years. Yes, it's a science. Yes, we can predict job performance, and that what matters for companies. Now you say you contradict with yourself. You're talking about well-being. Now you say you are supporting job performance prediction, and I'm I'm not, they are not exclusive. Don't think in like extremes, like we are not gonna throw the baby with the water. We have established connections between predictors and criteria. We have meta-analyses. It's not just job performance. We have um, mm, engagement, we have satisfaction, we have other criteria. We use personality to predict. So we need to be scientists, otherwise what are we gonna be flipping coins and talking with people? I want to open a factory uh, with like 500 people, but my item pool, my applicant pool is 50,000. What am I gonna be flipping 50,000 times coins? And so no, we have to use psychometrics. We cannot go this we cannot have a clinical approach in selection. I'm sorry, it's not practical. But I said this thing. I was so assertive because others say it. This is a recurring. It's good that you gave us this opportunity to talk about this in such length. It's a recurring issue we are seeing with our clients, not just us in DDI. Other big companies see it constantly, and like companies that have collected validity evidence over decades go to a client and they say, "What's this validity? I like this tool," and the tool is the four-letter tool, right? That predicts that
Mm,
for the four-letter tool that starts with M and ends at BTI. So
right.
and that too, we know only extroversion predicts. And extroversion is extremely important for leadership, right? No.
Oh,
No. So
I'm hurt.
extroversion,
I'm hurt, Georgi. Of course,
no,
it's important. We want it more.
yeah, but extroversion from all meta-analysis is a low correlated with job performance, but they love it for the extroversion. Okay. Okay. So what do
Yeah.
you want? A tool that predicts job performance or because you like extroversion? Then we get a little bit nefarious. We go nefarious with what are the likings of the HR people who are the buyers of the tools. I think sometimes that's what decides what's gonna be used in the company, how enlightened they are. So we have to enlighten them as much as we can because they are the we don't talk on the with the CEO for their budget. They talk and they have to negotiate budgets for psychometrics. So they better ask for the best tools, not for the networking tools, as I call them, that connect people.
Now, Basir, you have a question.
Thank you, sir. Georgi, Nikita, wonderful, wonderful session. And I will confess I haven't read the book, but I'm buying it and reading it. So my apologies, and we'll watch the recording over. So, Georgi, on the point of companies requiring extroverts as the ideal CEO, a few years ago, BBC featured a report about the brain scans of CEO being similar to those that are psychopaths and sociopaths
You
in the criminal justice system.
I'll just take that. So recently, I was talking with a colleague who used to work in the South African prison system before she moved to Nordics to work in corporates. She says there's a lot of hoo-ha about psychopathy in corporates, but you don't actually see them there. She worked with actual psychopaths in prison. Can say you can spot them like 12 paces away. They're a psychopath. It's clear, and you want to stay away from them. But she says so. Corporate environment usually rejects psychopathy, but she says you know where you find them a lot? Founders of startups because they've been rejected by corporate, so they set up their own gig. She says you're much more likely to find psychopathy in startups than you are in corporate environments. I think with corporate environments, what we observe is something else. What I'm looking forward to research is going back to what Georgi said, what's rewarded and punished, to what kind of unethical behavior is rewarded within corporates and promotions, and how by the time you reach CEO, you've been conditioned by the environment to behave in a certain way, which you think is normal. And I think there's a very nice little hint, which came out from a recent paper which looked at the big five and correlation with promotion within the corporate environment, and low agreeableness was one of them. So people are selected for lower agreeableness, and high agreeableness, people are more likely to be ethical in their behavior and all of this. So it's almost the system selects and conditions people to be unethical. And after all, they do call it the greasy pole. And and I always say you can't spell organizational culture without using the word cult. And what's really interesting is what behaviors are rewarded and which behaviors are punished, and what we tolerate and reward. And sometimes it's not the most ethical and kindness behaviors.
Let me say also to add that I agree with what Nikita says, and I want to
Oh,
add
Jesus Christ, that's a first.
I want to add that Machiavelli, there is a construct we call Machiavellianism in IO psychology. If you ask clinical psychologists, there is no such construct. It's just a toned down version of psychopathy. But when we talk about executives, I think what you, Nikita, are saying is Machiavellianism. If you read the book by Machiavelli, who was actually a good person, just read his biography. He was actually ended up in misfortune because he was too honest, I guess, laying out the science of manipulation. And you will see that exactly if you do the things that are transactional, that are useful, you will get to the top. But to go back to our book, you will lose yourself. The self you had as a child, I don't believe any child is evil unless, yeah, it's not evil, but you would not be that child. You would be a self that went on a binge in Walmart and bought so much Kool-Aid and gummy bears, and it just is sick on this sugar. Like, do you get my metaphor? The self went to a corporation and got so many rewards for being low agreeable, ruthless, firing people, very ambitious, pushing people. It went to the top, and now you have a new self. And you ask this person, we have coaches here. Maybe you share your examples, but do you ask them the question? Who are you? Do you remember yourself from your teenage years, from your childhood? Because I'm sure they are not the same person. The self has dramatically changed. Yeah, they're not psychopath. They're not gonna uh, plan how to butcher someone and eat them for breakfast. But
That's cannibalism. That's slightly different, Georgi.
well, the psychopaths do have cannibalism. Nikita, you have to read more about what they do. But the point is, they will hurt a lot of people. Yeah, they won't kill them. They will not get persecuted. But if they don't, with a slave of a hand, they lay off thousands of people. They change thousands of lives.
Don't
And
forget pollution.
instead of they just have to let go of their salaries first. I want to see a CEO that first, when he thinks about think about their company, just says, I'm gonna take $1 salary from now. And you saw with the Boeing person, they're gonna kill us from falling from the skies, but we are gonna retire that person with how much of a bonus? In what world do you retire incompetent people with such huge salaries? That is that is that's the scary thing, that we reward them to be bad to us, and that's the boards, and the boards are the next expiring CEOs. So
And the young people don't want to take it anymore, and we think there's something wrong with them. One of my favorite moments of facilitating workshops was facilitating with a bunch of, let's say, senior people in the banking industry. And halfway through the workshop, one of them goes, I think I got it. They go, what? Because remember that consultant came a couple of months ago, said we're assholes to millennials. They go, yeah, what of him? And he goes, I'm starting to suspect we might be assholes to more than just millennials.
Question.
So I'm going to give you a contextual question.
Right.
So in this age where we have people having archetypes and the youth being represented on the board, these are the wants of the times, right? That you want people representing the archetype of nature and other things. I don't know if it's archetype or what you will call it, but they want to represent someone to take the stand of nature. But if you have to make a company where you have to hire, say, 5,000 people at a time or for expansion scale, and this is these people are educated, but they will have to be retrained into a new way of thinking because that's the requirement of this world. All of us have this decolonized minds, these kings of the past that are still hung up in us, and they need to be washed and shown up as they are and then recalibrated into the new way things need to be done. How would you go about processing that hiring process, or how would you suggest what things should we take care of, what processes should be taken care of in that particular scenario?
Well, first of all, as what Georgi mentioned, make sure the tools you use actually integrate the questions you want to ask them. So if you want to hire people for corporate social responsibility, ask them questions to do with corporate social responsibility and not just their introversion and extroversion. Another key thing, integrate a development programs that's linked with selection that's based around the individual's growth. Because the key thing is we also say about personality, the concept of self. Ultimately, what all the psychometrics try to measure is your self-construct or self-narrative, is a story you tell yourself about yourself. And we ask you hundreds of questions like, I like to go to parties, or I like to spend my holiday in a cabin in the woods rather than a busy beach. So what we're trying to assess is your self-construct, and we visualize it through graphs, narratives, text, all of that. But the question is how often people update that narrative. We update software on our devices all the time, but when was the last time you updated yourself? Who you think you are? Because your self-narrative, we're very sticky about it. When other people even tell us evidence, there's something else, like when my wife tells me I'm being argumentative, my response is, no, I'm not, because I think I'm being logical. So even when people present us with evidence which challenges the self-construct, we brush it away. And I think that what's really important with personality is to embrace liminality. We're in between two spaces. Our personality is based partly on who we think we are, on the environment around us, and who we aspire to become. And of course, there's lots of other variables, of course, but basically, there is that kind of, your personality is always in flux. And I think that this is why we struggle to define it. We are different in our works, with our family, and all of that. In many different situations, we're slightly different. And it's all authentically you because you do it. Of course, energy levels, as previously mentioned, like if you're really introverted and you need to be really extrovert, can be exhausting. But that's secondary. That's about energy management. But so, for example, if you have to do something which is not in line with your personality, do it when you have energy. So if you're a morning person, do it in the morning. Don't put it off to Friday afternoon. And things like that. So, but it needs to be integrated within the development. So if you want people to have more social environmental responsibility, integrate the charities, have charity partners, have contact with nature, cleanups, all that stuff. But integrated within the corporate environment, within ROIs, how you measure performance, or even integrated within the bonus structure with the senior management, for the hell of it. See what happens. And see how you change from that humanistic individual perspective, rather than doing a generic workshop on how people should have more influence. Well, might work for some. So I think it's about this kind of consistent selection, development from a humanistic individual perspective.
So what you've spoken about is more towards culture.
Yes.
And because the building blocks will make the culture, and that's what leading from the grassroots is about. How can the process that we set up help for self-organizing culture to take shape and stabilize, but also not influence some other structure establishing? Is
I would
and
say there's a lot of potential unintentional consequences. But the thing here would be have discussions, integrate this into weekly meetings or monthly meetings, create some really interesting surveys you send to your staff. There is this interesting company called Timpson in UK. It's a family business. They do keys, photographs, shoes, repair, and all of this. And a lot of companies send engagement surveys with hundreds of questions to their staff.
Yes.
They send only one question. In the last year, was my manager kind to me? That's the only question you need to answer. I might be paraphrasing. That's it. Because that's what they prioritize, kindness. They say they have two rules: put the money in the till and do whatever else you want. So, and you can see Timpson, CEO, he does lots of interviews and he talks about the journey, how he kind of, because he was the boss's son, he could do whatever he wanted in the shop he ran. So then how over decades, he tried to instill the same culture to every shop. And because it's a CEO, not a consultant, he doesn't use long words. He doesn't use jargon. And he just talks about the value and the sense of community they create. And it's just a refresh, but it is culture. It's about community rather than a psychometric, sadly.
Yeah. So thank you, Nikita and Georgi, for joining us today. I have like 10 more questions, but I wonder if we couldn't.
Fire away too. Let's do this the quick
Well,
way.
I think I'd like Stefan or Debbie or Rose. I'd like to check in with you.
So
We can-
my question is, what's next?
Next.
There's so much here. It's so rich. So thank you both very much. But my experience with any kind of assessment, I always, and I know that I'm doing coaching, so it's good to know yourself, but I'm more interested in the relationships, tests around that, how to, that's what I struggle, or my clients struggle with, how to interact with someone who has a different personality. That's what's causing the friction. And if you do that well, you could actually, have a good, well-functioning organization, well-being, personal, and the organization as well. So that's something that I'm thinking about. If you have any thoughts on that.
What's next? If I had the limited resources and I was for a startup, not unlimited, I would do an assessment that would measure emotional intelligence and effectiveness in a high-stakes situation where a very, very diverse team. It could be a role play, it could be a presentation, it could be. I want to see how people actually work with other diverse people and leverage their strengths and watch out for their other errors in personality language. But I actually want to see them effective doing the things that companies care for, which are the competencies, decision making, coaching, delegating, things that HRs love, the competence.
From my side, I always start the workshop with a group with the following words. If by the end of today or at the end of the 2 hours, we can be a couple of percent more curious about ourselves and others and a couple of percent less judgmental, I would count it as a success. I think when we work with our opposites, a lot of biases get the best of us, such as we form opinions so quickly about others based on so little information. Our brains are like magic. Like you can have almost no information about somebody and you can have really strong opinions about them at the same time. So in the moment those opinions set in, things like confirmation bias sets in, etc. And the confirmation bias is not just for Google searches. Because what can happen when you fall out with your psychological opposite? Who do you seek contact with? Probably somebody who agrees with you, somebody similar to you. So, for example, there's a little bar in Canary Wharf called All Bar One. Hopefully, it will reopen. Canary Wharf is one of the banking centers.
Don't go there today
London.
anymore. You need to recover.
Yeah, don't worry. I'm recovering after PSYOPs. Thank
That's
you.
always you say what you say, but you are still losing your voice.
It's all right, man. It's investing, not losing. And then I'd hear the same conversations next to me again and again. And the conversation goes something like this. I wasn't too harsh, was I? No, they need to learn. Plus, if they think they have it hard, they have no idea how we had it in our 20s. It's because it's confirmation bias, somebody being a bit of an asshole to somebody else. And instead of talking with them, they're talking with somebody who agrees with them. Little do they know, a couple of tables down, a highly agreeable person is sitting with a highly agreeable person, goes, the psychopath we need to work with. Yeah, I know, right? And the biggest irony is the next day they need to work with each other. And this, it grows. And for example, extroverts perceiving introverts as rejecting of their ideas, introverts perceiving extroverts as overwhelming. And the key thing is, if you have a toolkit to manage the diversity around you, as a friend of us, Ron Warren, says, to facilitate collective intelligence as a leader, and I would add diversity of personality. That makes you not want to follow another fad of to be empathetic, or vulnerable, or visionary. It allows you and exhaust yourself doing it. It allows you to see, oh, how I can work with colleagues who already have that, how I can manage that. But that starts, and I always say, if you're looking for sustainable high performance or high performance, you can read hundreds of books, or you can listen to Aretha Franklin. RESPECT. It all starts with respect. It's we need to respect all the qualities of personality, introversion, extroversion, even neuroticism. What did Bernard Shaw say? And I read it on Facebook, so I know it's true, is that the society needs a pessimist and the optimist. The optimist builds the airplane, the pessimist the parachute. And the question is that we need to value that. So it starts with respect overall of different personalities and how we work together, how facilitate collective intelligence. Because right now, I think society is presented with great challenges. Like, there's no meaning in modern life. Like, go solve global warming. Find out how to filter out microplastics. Fill your boots with meaning. But for this, we need to come together because these issues affect us all. And I think that right now, humans can do amazing things and we can do terrible things. We can build the pyramids that future generations will think the aliens did it. We can
I
land
think
on
aliens did it.
well, see, future
I'm not a
generation.
future generation.
Well,
We
yeah,
can talk about that. Who
that's
built the
conspiracy theory.
pyramid?
That's high openness, and that should be discussed at the bar.
Oh, so are you agreeing with me or disagreeing?
We can discuss this further because here's the little
Okay.
fun fact. How was the book born? The book was born out of an argument on LinkedIn.
It was
And
not an argument. I approached you to argue, but you disarmed me. So it was a good civil discussion. We were not arguing.
subjective perspective, what can I say? But anyways, we decided to have a call instead of leaving it just at keyboard warrior stage. And that's how the book is born. And I think that this is one of the key things, is actually seeing the benefit in arguing, the benefit in discussions. Like, we went to a conference, there was barely any arguing. There was not barely any time for questions because 5 PowerPoints before run over time. Like, if there's no discussion, I might as well watch a YouTube video. And
Yeah.
how much time we actually discuss, how much time we
Well,
actually
that's about how they present their science and how they waste their time reading their slides instead of just leaving the crowd. So this is a problem with our field. We do not present well. I mean, I present. You can see. But
Well, you make my Promethean point again about the three things, love and work, but creating collective intelligence, creating understanding actually is a lot of what we have to do in order to be happy and be effective.
yes,
So pleasure.
thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Wonderful
Bye.
question, direction.
Yes,
All
thank
the
you,
best.
Tom. It was wonderful. 2
It was.
hours.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
All the
Thank you.
best. Bye.
Bye.